Some unexpected good news for Democrats. According to CNN, the White House has announced that they'll be putting hundreds of thousands of signs across America marking infrastructure projects with President Biden's name, a move that comes after Republicans have been taking credit for the projects that they voted against. Here's what some of those signs look like so far, with them clearly denoting that the projects were funded by President Joe Biden's infrastructure law. This is a move that many have been begging the White House to take because while Biden and Democrats have passed a historic amount of legislation for Americans, which has led to record job growth, record low unemployment, a boom in manufacturing, and now finally a decline in inflation, polling shows that they simply aren't getting enough credit for what they've managed to accomplish so far. And the issues that are still very present in the economy, whether it's rich tax cheats or price gouging or wealth inequality, these problems are exacerbated by Republicans who either block any action on fixing them or outright make it worse by doing things like cutting IRS funding that specifically goes toward making the wealthy pay their fair share. It's almost like, and I hope you're sitting down for this, Republicans actually want these problems to persist so that they can use them as cudgels against Democrats. The infrastructure law, passed by Democratic majorities in 2021, is a particularly strong example of how Democrats do the heavy lifting while most Republicans vote against the bill and then turn around and try to take credit for it while gaslighting their own voters. To give you an idea of what we're dealing with, here's just a small handful of Republicans who voted against the bill but are now claiming credit. Here's Alabama Republican Senator Tommy Tuberville bragging about the bill's investments in broadband access, which he calls, quote, vital for the success of our entire economy. He voted against it. Here's Texas Republican Congressman Tony Gonzalez praising an ecosystem restoration plan in his district that was funded by the infrastructure bill. He says in a statement, for many folks in the area, this project revives the area's storied past and deep roots. Not only did Gonzalez vote against the bill, he released a statement back in November of 2021 blasting the bill, saying the Democrats' path to trillions more in spending will only make matters worse and hold our country back. Here's Texas Republican Senator John Cornyn taking credit for $3.3 billion in federal funds to boost broadband expansion efforts. You can guess how he voted on that funding. Here's Tennessee Republican Senator Marsha Blackburn shaking hands with constituents talking about how proud she is of the progress they've made in expanding broadband and how it has positively impacted the country. Yeah, she's really proud now that it actually passed despite her no vote, so she has no choice but to lie and pretend that she supported it all along. Here's Missouri Republican Congressman Sam Graves bragging about a highway project funded by Biden's infrastructure law that he voted against. And I can go on and on and on. The examples do not stop. So it is absolutely essential that Democrats fight back against this by reminding voters who actually voted for these investments and who stood in the way. And these signs, which the White House says will amount to hundreds of thousands in total, are a necessary step in achieving that. And look, does this mean that suddenly Republicans are going to give up and stop lying? Of course not. But it at least provides some pushback to the non-stop barrage of disinformation coming from the right-wing media machine. And that's what we need. Because while some people might see this as a waste of resources or a lack of humility, we have to acknowledge that the other side is mounting a persuasion operation to mislead, distract, and confuse voters like we've never seen before. We are dealing with a political party that is so deluded, they think an insurrection that they orchestrated to attack the seat of American democracy and install the loser of an election was actually a false flag operation. A political party that now thinks that Watergate, the one scandal that basically all Americans agreed was universally bad and Richard Nixon's subsequent resignation was necessary for the good of the country, they now think it was actually a witch hunt by the deep state. And I wish I was kidding.
I think the atmosphere, perhaps, Stephen, is right for true reform here at the DOJ. Sir, how do you go about doing it?
Well, the first and most important thing is to reestablish what is known as the unitary executive. So this goes back to the Watergate era, and now we obviously know, looking back on it now, of course, that was a deep state coup against Richard Nixon. But this goes back to the Watergate era, in which, and by the way, the cost of that, just so we're talking about measuring this in human lives, is that, just I know this is a tangent, but just to understand the consequence of the deep state thinking they run policy. Getting rid of Nixon, who was pursuing an honorable peace and a durable peace in Vietnam, led to the complete collapse of Nixon's Vietnam strategy after he left office that would have then kept some sort of peace in Indochina, and instead we were left with communist butchery on a scale that few can imagine. I'm not talking about the validity of entering the war. I'm just pointing out that when you get rid of duly elected presidents, the effects on policy can be truly calamitous.
So just like how nothing is ever Donald Trump's fault when he continually commits massive crimes, now nothing is Richard Nixon's fault either, despite being involved in a massive scandal. Starting to notice a pattern here? The point is that this is a party that is solely focused on misinforming people, which may explain why the GOP's target base is expressly those with less education. Here's Trump admitting as much.
We won with poorly educated. I love the poorly educated. We're the smartest people. We're the most loyal people.
And he knows that now the way the parties have flipped over, the more education you have, the more likely you are to vote for a Democrat. So he's pushing all of these young people into universities. They get brainwashed there, and then he wipes their debts for votes. It's really shameful, and the Supreme Court's going to knock it down.
Republicans love the poorly educated because the only way they're successful is enough people believe their lies. They don't want those with the ability to think critically. They want those who they can exploit, and that's exactly what they've been doing. And so now, Democrats have to make a concerted effort to actively and loudly advertise their wins, because while these wins may seem obvious to those of us who watch videos like this one regularly, the polling data clearly shows that it's not obvious for far too many voters. So yes, the White House is doing what is smart and necessary here, and the Democratic Party more broadly should bring this strategy forward with them. But it's not just on the White House to tout their own accomplishments. There should be a collective effort to inform people about what democratic governance can do. So in that spirit, let me try and lay out the case for the 2024 election as succinctly as I can. Democrats passed an infrastructure bill whose effects will be felt for decades to come. They recovered the economy with the American Rescue Plan. They passed the CHIPS Act, which has led to the biggest boom in American manufacturing jobs in modern American history and will reduce our supply chain reliance on China. They oversaw the fastest job growth in U.S. history and the lowest unemployment rate in 50 years. They passed the biggest climate investment in history and allowed Medicare to finally negotiate lower drug prices. They reauthorized the Violence Against Women Act. They passed the first gun safety legislation in decades. They passed the PACT Act for veterans health care. They oversaw the largest reduction in the deficit in history. They codified marriage equality for same-sex and interracial couples into federal law, and I can go on, but the point is clear. Democrats have delivered an agenda that is popular and has helped this country thrive. As for Republicans, they stood in the way of all of those things that I just listed. And when they took power in the House by the thinnest of margins this year, they moved to pass abortion restrictions, make it easier for the ultra-wealthy to cheat on their taxes, and wasted time and money on useless nonsense investigations into private citizens that only serve to distract us from what actually impacts our democracy. There is one party that's interested in governing, and there's another that's only interested in tearing things down. If we want to defend our democracy, improve the economy for all Americans, and not just the wealthy, defend our rights and freedoms, rebuild our infrastructure, save our planet from climate catastrophe, and so much more, the answer could not be more clear. And given how far the MAGA cult has gone to this point, the stakes could not be higher than they are right now. Before you go, I need some help. Please subscribe to the channel and do your part to help grow the progressive media ecosystem. I don't do sponsorships or paid ads, I won't ask for money, but just subscribing to this channel goes a really long way, and it helps get the message out to more people. The subscribe button is right here on this screen. You can also subscribe to my Spanish language channel, which I made to reach those crucial Spanish-speaking voters. That link is on the screen too. And finally, if you want to listen to my audio podcast, you can follow that link as well. Thanks so much for watching.